Hello again. So, first, I have a question. It seems that most of my friends watch our stories on Monday. So, should I post these stories on Monday? I imagine you all have lives and are very busy on the weekends. I, well, I really have no life, but such is the way of small blue water spirits. Let me know in the comments if you prefer to watch the stories on Mondays. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, I have heard back that I need to improve my sound quality. So let me know if it's better this time. I do hope so. I want this to be a pleasant and wonderful experience. Well, at least until we reach the inevitable soul crushing, violent, bloody part of the story. That seems pretty consistent. Onward! I am again excited by a request. This means I will, sadly, have to put off Rapunzel for another week. I'm sure she's fine in her tower. Probably. I hope. This week I will be telling the tale of Snow White and Rose Red. This tale is not as well known as many other Grimm stories, and the few people I've talked to believe this to be a sequel to Snow White. It is not. The Grimm brothers just reused the same names, like a lot. Without further ado, I give you Snow White and Rose Red. A poor widow lived all alone in a small cottage. You know, surprisingly few tales actually start with once upon a time. I digress. A poor widow lived all alone in a small cottage, and in front of this cottage was a garden with two rose bushes. One bore white roses, and the other red. The widow has two daughters. Uh, well, then she didn't live alone, did she? Boy, three sentences in, and we're already starting with the inconsistencies. Who looked just like the rose bushes. Green and leafy? One was called Snow White, and the other Rose Red. They were more pious and kind, more hard-working and diligent than any other two children in the world. To be sure, Snow White was more quiet and gentle than Rose Red, who preferred to run around in the meadows and fields, look for flowers, and catch butterflies. Snow White stayed at home with her mother and helped her with the housework or read to her when there was nothing else to do, and wow, is this a fairy tale? Sorry, have you ever met children? The two children loved each other so much that they always held hands whenever they went out. And Snow White said, "Let us never leave each other." Rose Red answered, "Never as long as we live." And their mother added, "Whatever one of you has, remember to share it with the other." Ah, this is completely unbelievable. So there's two more paragraphs talking about how angelic and wonderful and amazing these kids are, and something about doves and lambs, and I think I'll just skip ahead to the actual story. One long winter evening, as they were standing together, there was a knock on the door, as if someone wanted to be let in. The mother said, "Quick, Rose Red, open the door. It must be a traveler looking for shelter." Rose Red pushed back the bolt, thinking it would be some poor man, but instead it was a bear. He stuck his thick black head through the door, and Rose Red jumped back and screamed. Snow White hid herself behind her mother's bed. However, the bear began to speak and said, "Don't be afraid. I won't harm you. I'm half frozen and only want to warm myself here a little." "You poor bear," the mother said. Really, are talking bears common around these parts? Well, I suppose that was said by a small blue monster. "Lie down by the fire and take care that it does not burn your fur." Then she called out, "Snow White, Rose Red, come out. The bear won't harm you. He means well." They both came out and gradually lost their fear of him. The bear said, "Come, children, dust the snow off my coat a little." So they fetched a broom and swept the fur clean. Afterward, he stretched himself out beside the fire and uttered growls to show how content and comfortable he was. It did not take them long to become accustomed to one another. and the clumsy guest had to put up with the mischievous pranks of the girls. Wait, I thought they were supposed to be well behaved angels. They took a hazel switch and hit him. Oh, yes, little angels for sure. Hazel switch. The bear took everything in good spirit. Only when they became too rough did he cry out, "Let me live, children! Snow White, Rose Red, would you beat your suitor dead?" Suitor? Is there a definition of suitor? I don't think I know. Huh. Per Google, suitor, noun, 1. A man who pursues a relationship with a particular woman with a view to marriage. I am suddenly very disturbed. When it was time to sleep and the others went to bed, the mother said to the bear, "You're welcome to lie down by the hearth. Then you'll be protected from the cold and bad weather." As soon as dawn arrived, the two girls let him go outside, and he trotted over the snow into the forest. From then on, the bear came every evening at a certain time, lay down by the hearth, and allowed the children to play with him as much as they wanted. And they became so accustomed to him that they never locked the door until their bear playmate had arrived. I'm wondering if there was a better way to phrase some of that. One morning, when spring had made its appearance and everything outside was green, the bear said to Snow White, "Now I must go away, and I shall not return the entire summer." "But where are you going, dear bear?" asked Snow White. "I must go into the forest and guard my treasures from the wicked dwarfs." Doesn't that feel dwarfist to you? In the winter, when the ground is frozen hard, they must remain underground and can't work their way through to the top. But now that the sun has thawed and warmed this earth, they will break through, climb out, search around, and steal. Yep, that is definitely dwarfist. Once they get something in their hand and carry it to their caves, it will not easily see the light of day again. I'm going to get complaints about this. I just know it. Snow White was very sad about his departure. She unlocked the door, and when the bear hurried out, he became caught on the bolt and a piece of his fur ripped off, and it seemed to Snow White that she saw gold glimmering through the fur, but she was not sure. The bear hurried away and soon disappeared beyond the trees. Some time after, the mother sent the girls to the forest to gather firewood. There they found a large tree lying on the ground that had been chopped down. Something was jumping up and down on the grass near the trunk, but they could not tell what it was. As they came closer, they saw a dwarf with an old withered face and a beard that was snow white and a yard long. To the tip of the beard was caught in a crack of the tree, and the little fellow was jumping back and forth like a dog on a rope and did not know what to do. He glared at the girls with his furious red eyes and screamed, "What are you standing there for? Can't you come over here and help me?" "How did you get into this jam, little man?" asked Rose Red. "You stupid nosy goose," answered the dwarf. Well, he can just help himself out. I think they should leave. "I wanted to split the tree and get some wood for my kitchen. I just had driven in the wedge safely, and everything would have gone all right, but the cursed wedge was too smooth, and it sprang out unexpectedly. The tree snapped shut so rapidly that I could not save my beautiful white beard. Now it's stuck there, and I can't get away, and all you silly, creamy faced things can do is laugh. Ugh! You're all nasty." The girls tried as hard as they could, but they could not pull the beard out. It was stuck too tight. "I'll run and get somebody," Rose Red said. "Crazy fool," the dwarf snarled. "Why run and get someone? The two of you are already enough." Can't you think of something better? You know, I've known several dwarves over my lifetime, and they've all been really wonderful. I just want you to know that the views of this fairy tale are not the views of your furry blue friend. Don't be so impatient, said Snow White. Oh, wrong voice. Don't be so impatient, said Snow White. I'll think of something. She took out a pair of scissors from her pocket and cut off the tip of his beard. As soon as the dwarf felt that he was free, he grabbed a sack filled with gold that was lying between the roots of the tree. He lifted it out and grunted to himself, "Uncouth sloths! How could you cut off a piece of my fine beard? Good riddance to you." Upon saying this, he swung the sack over his shoulder and went away without once looking at the girls. That's just rude. Some time after, Snow White and Rose Red wanted to catch some fish for dinner. As they approached the brook, they saw something like a large grasshopper bouncing forward toward the water as if it wanted to jump in. They ran to the spot and recognized the dwarf. "Where are you going?" asked Rose Red. "You don't want to jump into the water, do you?" "I'm not such a fool as that," the dwarf screamed. "Don't you see that the cursed fish wants to pull me in?" The little man had been sitting there and fishing, and unfortunately the wind had caught his beard, so that it had become entangled with his line. Just then a large fish had bitten the bait, and the feeble little dwarf did not have the strength to land the fish, which had the upper hand, and pulled him towards the water. To be sure, the dwarf had to grab hold of the reeds and rushes, but that did not help too much. I suppose leaving him for the fish would be a bad thing. The girls had come just in the nick of time. They held on to him tightly and tried to untangle his beard from the line. However, it was to no avail. The beard and the line were meshed together, and there was nothing left to do but take out the scissors and cut off a small piece of his beard. When the dwarf saw this, he screamed at them. "You bird brains! You've disfigured my face like barbarians. It was not enough that you clipped the tip of my beard. Now you've cut off the best part. I won't be able to show myself among my friends. May you both walk for miles on end until the soles of your shoes are burned off." Then he grabbed a sack of pearls that was lying in the rushes, and without saying another word, he dragged it away and disappeared behind a rock. Ha! Should have let the fish get him. It happened that soon after this the girls were sent by their mother to the city to buy thread, needles, lace, and ribbons. Their way led over a heath which had huge pieces of rock scattered here and there. A large bird circled slowly in the air above them, flying lower and lower until it finally landed on the ground not far from a rock. Right after that, they heard a piercing, terrible cry. They ran to the spot and saw with horror that the eagle had seized their little acquaintance, the dwarf, and intended to carry him away. "Get him! Get him! Kill him! Bite his head off!" Oh, sorry. That's right. I remember now. These girls are angelic. The girls took pity on him and grabbed hold of the little man as tightly as they could. They tugged against the eagle until finally the bird had to abandon his prey. Pity. When the dwarfs had recovered from his initial fright, he screeched at them. "Couldn't you have handled me more carefully? You've torn my coat to shreds. It was thin enough to begin with, but now it's got holes and rips all over. You clumsy louse!" Then he took a sack with jewels and once again slipped under a rock into his cave. The girls were accustomed to his ingratitude and continued on their way. Doesn't make it right. I guess the moral of the story is be an idiot and girls will still cut off your beard and rip your clothes. Wait, that doesn't. I'll just move on. They took care of their chores in the city, and when they crossed the heath again on their way home, they surprised the dwarf, who had dumped his sack of jewels on a clean spot, not thinking that anyone would come by at such a late hour. The evening sun's rays were cast upon the glistening stones, which glimmered and sparkled in such radiant colors that the girls had to stop and look at them. "Why are you standing there and gaping like monkeys?" the dwarf screamed, and his ash-gray face turned scarlet with rage. He was about to continue his cursing when a loud growl was heard, and a black bear came charging out of the forest. The dwarf jumped up in terror, but he could not reach his hiding place in time. The bear was already too near. Filled with fear, the dwarf called out, "Dear Mr. Bear, spare my life, and I'll give you all my treasures. Look at the beautiful jewels lying there. Grant me my life. What good is a small, measly fellow like me? You wouldn't be able to feel me between your teeth. Those wicked girls over there, they would be better for you. They're such tender morsels, fat as young quails. For heaven's sakes, eat them instead of me." Really? He had enough time to say all of that, but not enough time to make a run for it? Did the bear just stop and listen, or did it really take that long to charge? I mean, that is a lot. That's like in the Odyssey when Hector takes a spear to the throat and then talks for 2 pages about how he's dying. The bear did not pay any attention to the dwarf's words, so he's just a slow bear, but gave the evil creature a single blow with his paw, and the dwarf did not move again. I knew this would end somehow in bloodshed. I bet it sprayed like a Tarantino movie. I've been reading too many of these stories. The girls had run away. See, that's really smart. So much smarter than the dwarf. You know, I don't really need to run fast, just faster than you. But the bear called after them, "Snow White, Rose Red, don't be afraid. Wait, I'll go with you." Then they recognized the voice and stopped. When the bear came up to them, his bearskin suddenly fell off. Ew. That's really disturbing. Imagine someone's skin just falling off. And there stood a handsome man, clad completely in gold. "I am the son of a king," he said. So a prince. You couldn't have just said a prince? "And I had been cast under a spell by the wicked dwarf who stole my treasures." Well, that explains why he's dwarfist. "He forced me to run around the forest as a wild bear, and only death could release me from the spell. Now he has received his justly earned punishment." So this would have been a shorter story if we let the fish or the bird have him. Saved everyone a lot of trouble. Snow White was married to the prince. That was fast. And Rose Red to his brother. He has a brother? Wow. Seriously, this whole ending is like that old school Snow White ride at Disneyland, you know, where the witch dies dead because some rock falls on her and then a door opens and then it just says, "And they all lived happily ever after." I mean, it gives you whiplash. They shared in the great treasures that the dwarf had collected in his cave, and I'm sure they returned them all to their rightful owners whenever possible, because these girls are angelic after all. The old mother lived many more peaceful and happy years with the children. Indeed, she took the 2 rose bushes with her, and they stood in front of her window, and every year they bore the most beautiful roses, white and red. "I see what you did there, Grimm Brothers. We circled right around to the beginning again. Nicely done." Oh, that was a good story, and very not soul crushing. I mean, a little bit violent, but not soul crushing. I understand why it was requested. I feel good. It's nice with no dead mother, father never even mentioned, bad guy dies relatively untortured death, and no hot iron shoes, gouged eyes, shaved body parts, or air spirit guilt trips. I've been cheated! I should have done Rapunzel. Fine. I have another question for you in the comments. Should we do more feel good stories like this, or look for the soul crushing, bloody, torturous stories we've come to expect? At any rate, I would like my tiny little channel to grow if you could please help me defeat the evil algorithm by cutting off a bit of your beard. Oh, sorry. If you could just like, comment, and subscribe. It's incredibly helpful. Sharing would be nice too. Whatever I can get. Join us next week when we will most likely tell Rapunzel.